Hello everyone, and welcome to the Angular v15 launch event. My name is Simona Kotin, and I'm an engineering manager on the Angular team. The entire team is absolutely thrilled to have you join us from all over the world. We value the incredible Angular community, whether you have been with us since before the launch of Ivy, or even if you're just joining us now. Everyone is welcome in Angular. Angular is a framework designed to help developers to deliver web apps with confidence. And we want to enable teams of all sizes build apps their users love to use. Whether you're building those apps out of your favorite coffee shop, or if you're building the next big startup, Angular is here with best practices and strong defaults to help scale your development and your teams. We have so many fantastic announcements and updates to share across many areas of the framework. We're going to be sharing details around the state of standalone APIs, the Directive composition API, tooling, and so much more. All right, how about we get started with our very first presenter? Everyone, please welcome Jeremy Elborn.
Ahoy, web friends! I'm Jeremy Elborn, tech lead for Angular, and I am sincerely excited to show off a brand new feature we're releasing in Angular v15, the Directive Composition API. Angular devs have long wanted a way to reuse behaviors from directives without those directives showing up in the public API of their components. This has been one of our most requested features on GitHub, and it was even in my own personal top 5 feature requests. To show off this new feature, let's go through a scenario. Let's say I work on an app called Quality Xylophones. The designer on my team has come up with a new design for menus in our app, and I need to build a new component for them. They've even helpfully already written the CSS for me. We can start by adding a couple of components for our menu and menu item. Normally, we'd jump deep into coding out the menu functionality now. Instead, though, we can use the Directive Composition API to pull in behaviors we need from Angular CDK. To use the new API, we add a host directives property to our components, bringing in CDK menu and CDK menu item. This will apply these directives to the host element of these components. We can try out components in the template now. Note that there's no sign of anything CDK related in the API here. If we run our application and look at the rendered DOM, we get something like this. You can see that the CDK directives have applied a number of CSS classes and attributes, so we know that the directives have been applied. We can also navigate the menu with our keyboard. It works! The design I'm building also includes a disabled state for the menu items. I know that CDK menu item already has an input for this, so now I can update my host directives property and expose a disabled input as part of the menu items API. You can see we've refactored the entry in host directives so that we can specify the inputs property. This lets us use an alias on one of the CDK menu items inputs to be included in QXMenu's public API. In this case, we're aliasing the verbose CDK menu item disabled to the much shorter disabled. With this in place, we can now bind the disabled input on a menu item. You can alias any number of inputs and outputs from directives you apply in the host directives property to create a fully custom API while still delegating behavior to the composed directives. Now, I've got a functional menu now, but I need to change it from being an inline menu to a pop-up menu. So let's take what we've covered so far and apply that to finish up. I'll introduce a new component for my menu trigger. This component uses CDK menu trigger in host directives and aliases the input CDK menu trigger 4 to panel. Notice here that I can also use the host directives property on a directive in addition to a component. Now I'll go back to the template and add my new menu trigger. To connect the menu trigger to the menu pop-up, I put the menu inside of an ng template and declare the template variable called popup. And with all of that, I can hop back to my running demo and see the whole menu in action. I can click the menu trigger and get a fully functional pop-up menu. By using the Directive Composition API along with the CDK menu primitive, we have a pop-up menu that does everything we need, including setting all of the right attributes for accessibility. By adding and configuring a few host directives, we didn't even need to write a single line of JavaScript. And because it was so easy, I won't mind when the designer comes back next month with a new design. Now that you've seen what it can do, go try it out and let us know what you think.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy. The new Directive Composition API gives developers new powers to leverage composing behaviors of multiple directives into a single directive. The possibilities are endless for what developers can create. We cannot wait to find out what you'll build with the new Directive Composition API. Up next, Jessica Jenick will give us the latest updates on standalone components. Enjoy!
Hi, I'm Jessica Jenick, Senior Software Engineer on the Angular Framework team and expert punslinger. With the release of Angular version 14, we announced the new standalone APIs for components, directives, and pipes. We have a few updates for you. Since then, we've been hard at work updating the APIs behind the scenes to make working with standalone components more ergonomic for developers. We're beyond thrilled to announce today that standalone APIs are now out of developer preview and are now stable. Stable means developers can confidently build production apps using the standalone APIs. It also means that it's possible to build a complete application without ng modules. And what's important to many developers in the community, the APIs are backwards compatible and interoperable with module-based apps. We've updated other APIs and have implemented some simplification and improvements across the framework. Now there's Provide HTTP Client as a replacement for HTTP Client module, as well as Provide Router as a replacement for router modules.forRoot and forChild. And we've also updated the testing APIs to make sure that developers have the best experience possible with the new standalone APIs. So what's next? We'll continue to evolve the APIs gradually following semantic versioning. You'll be able to find out more about all the changes in an upcoming blog post. Take care of yourselves, everyone, and enjoy those new, now stable APIs.
Thanks for that fantastic update, Jessica. We love the fun and humor you bring to our updates. I think I can speak for the entire Angular community when I say that I am absolutely thrilled about standalone components being moved to stable. We definitely encourage you all to continue to develop new and exciting applications with standalone components. Next, Alex Castle is going to tell us how developers can improve image loading performance with the new image directive. Take it away, Alex.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Castle from the Chrome Aurora team. We've been working with Angular on an image directive optimized for core web vitals. In Angular v15, the image directive is now stable, and you can use it in applications with standalone components and in applications with ng modules. We include the directive as part of the common module, which means that all you need to do to take advantage of it is to replace the source attribute of an image element with ng source. At this point, the Angular image directive will apply optimizations to the images and ensure you're following best practices. For example, the Angular image directive lazy loads non-critical images by default and only eagerly loads images specially marked as priority. This ensures that most images exhibit optimal loading behavior. It also suggests adding pre-connect tags to speed up image loading and more. As part of the v15 release, we also enabled automatic generation of the image source set so that you can download appropriately sized images from the CDN, which can dramatically reduce load times. We received a lot of feedback that it's not always possible to specify the width and height of an image ahead of time. That's why you can also use fill mode, which removes the requirement for image dimensions and automatically styles the image to fill its containing element. After switching to the Angular image directive, Land's End observed a 75% improvement in their LCP. So make sure you ng update and include the image directive in your application for better performance and developer experience.
Well, Alex, the image directive is going to go a long way to help developers create a better experience for their users. Be sure to incorporate this new directive in your project right now and really take advantage of the potential performance gains. As developers, we all know that the debugging experience of a framework can have a huge impact on productivity. With that in mind, we've made some wonderful new updates to debugging that we think you are really going to like. To tell us more, here's Minko Gechev.
Hello everyone, my name is Minko Gechev. I lead developer relations for the Angular team at Google. In this video, I'll share how we improve stack traces in Angular version 15. Once a year, we run our developer satisfaction survey. After we analyze the results for debugging challenges people face, we noticed that there is a lot of confusion about error messages. Together with the Chrome DevTools team, we looked into this further and found a lot of opportunities for improvement in stack traces. To show you what I mean, let us first see how challenging the debugging experience could be with this simple component. Here, app component has a submit method, in which we set a loading flag to true, send a request, and change the loading flag to false. If you get an error in the method, your stack trace will look something like that. If you expand to look at the structured stack trace, things get even messier. You see a bunch of call frames, none of them related to the call that you actually altered. While building Angular apps and working on Angular DevTools, this was most of the nightmare in debugging I experienced, together with stepping into Zone.js. Now look at this. We see the same stack trace coming directly from the JavaScript virtual machine v8. But when we expand it to explore the structured stack trace, we see something way more meaningful. In fact, it is only links to source code that we altered. I'm so excited about this improvement. It will benefit every single Angular developer dozens of times every single day. Let me explain the improvements with it step by step. First, that's the messy stack trace you're used to be getting. Producing such a cryptic error is blocking you from using the most powerful tool when debugging, reading your error message. The first thing we do now is to make the stack trace relevant. So we remove all the call frames coming from the code that you actually didn't alter. We lose context here, but it was not that helpful anyway. We do that by automatically instructing Chrome DevTools from the Angular CLI that these scripts are not relevant for debugging. The next step is powerful. It links the stack traces by using Zone.js, where we use the new async stack tagging API to concatenate stack traces from asynchronous tasks and stitch them together. This way, you can trace what happened between different macrotasks and microtasks. This additional context is very valuable because it shows how the user clicked the submit button. After that, we triggered the request, we called fetch, and the execution failed. We're working on improving that a little further. See that click listener? It's coming directly from code generated by the Angular compiler, and it is not that meaningful. Even though it points to a template, we still see JavaScript rather than HTML. The next thing we're working on is to make stack traces friendly by mapping calls coming from HTML directly to your template. And you know what I love the most in this improvement? When setting breakpoints, I will never step into the Angular's runtime or Zone.js ever again. I get debugger support in Chrome DevTools and proper source tree. And this all works by default. Just make sure you ng update.
That was awesome. Those new stack traces are going to make a lot of developers happy. Having a focused view on the code you've authored will surely be a much more pleasant experience. Angular Material helps developers create accessible, responsive applications, and combined with the power of the CDK, developers can create some really meaningful experiences. Emma Twersky is here to give us updates on both of these great tools. Over to you, Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma from the Angular team. I'm excited to share everything new in Angular Material and the CDK in version 15. Let's dive in. Let's start with the most exciting update. MDC is here. No, not the Message Distribution Center, Miami-Dade College, or Mitochondria Defense Center. MDC stands for Material Design Components. And like the mitochondria, MDC is the powerhouse of our new components. The MDC refactor allowed our team to rebuild Angular Material components on top of a set of core primitives and reusable code, owned all by the Material Design core team. These components align to the latest specifications and will enable us to adopt Material 3 once we finalize the style tokens. MDC also includes a wide range of accessibility improvements, including better contrast ratio, increased touch target sizes, and refined ARIA semantics. For the most part, the TypeScript APIs and component directive selectors are identical to ensure you can upgrade smoothly. And we've tested these on thousands of Google projects in the wild to ensure we can provide you migration schematics. To update, we have provided the following steps. First, update to Angular Material v15. As part of this update, a schematic will run to automatically move your application to use the legacy imports containing the old component implementations. This provides a quick path to v15 with minimal changes. Next, run the migration tool. After updating to v15, you can run the migration tool to switch from the legacy components to the new MDC-based ones. This command updates your TypeScript, styles, and templates to the new implementations, updating as much as it can automatically. Depending on the size and complexity of your application, you may want to migrate a single component or a small group of components at a time, rather than all components at once. You may also want to migrate your app one module at a time instead of all together. You can use both the old implementation and new implementation in the same application, as long as they aren't used in the same ng module. The script will prompt you for the directory and components you want to migrate. After migrating with the script, check for to-dos left by the migration tool. In situations where the migration tool is not able to automatically update your code, it will attempt to add comments for you to follow up manually. These to-do comments follow a common format so they can be easily identified. To search for all comments left by the migration tool, search for to-do MDC migration in your IDE. Finally, verify your application. After running the migration and addressing the to-dos, verify that everything is working correctly. Run your tests and confirm that they pass. It's possible that your tests depended on internal DOM or async timing details of the old component implementations and may need to be updated. If you find you need to update some tests, consider using component harnesses to make the tests more robust. Component harnesses future-proof tests for future DOM changes and help ensure upgrading to future versions of our library is seamless for your team and ours. Run your application and verify that new components look right. Due to changes in internal DOM and CSS of the components, you may need to tweak some of your application styles. You can find a link to the detailed migration guide and complete list of changes in the v15 blog and description box below. MDC is built to take advantage of modern web features like design tokens and CSS variables, which allow us to more smoothly and quickly update to the latest in material web styling. I'm excited for what MDC unlocks for the future. And while the team was busy delivering MDC and those smooth migrations, that's not the only update in v15. We also resolved the fourth most upvoted issue, range selection support in the slider. To get a range input, use mat slider start thumb and mat slider end thumb in your slider inputs. Additionally, all components now have an API to customize density, which resolved another popular GitHub issue. You can now specify the default density across all of your components just by customizing your theme. Okay, that's a lot of love for Angular material components. But what about the CDK? The CDK also saw some exciting changes. The component dev kit offers a set of behavior primitives for building UI components. In v15, we introduced another primitive that you can customize for your use cases, the CDK list box. The Angular CDK list box module provides directives to help create custom list box interactions based on the WAI ARIA list box pattern. By using Angular CDK list box, you get all the expected behaviors for an accessible experience, including bitty layout support, keyboard interaction, and focus management. All directives apply their associated ARIA roles to their host element. Wow, v15 is definitely a powerhouse for Angular material and the CDK. Thank you for watching. Now go ng update.
Thank you, Emma, for those fantastic updates. It's always exciting to close a highly voted issue in an Angular release. So far, we've covered lots and lots of updates across the framework, but I think there's still room for more updates before we go to the live Q&A session with the Angular team. Mark, why don't you share some additional updates to Angular in v15?
Hey friends, it's Mark from the Angular team, and I'm here to tell you about even more updates from this latest release. First, let's check out a few updates from the tooling side. Back in Angular version 14, we announced experimental support for ES-Build and ng-Build. This experiment enabled faster build times and helps to simplify our build pipeline. Well, we have some exciting updates to share. Starting in Angular version 15, we're expanding support to include experimental Sass, SVG templates, and file replacement support. All right, I'm sure that you want to give this new feature a try. Well, here's how. Update the builders in angular.json from build-angular browser to build-angular ES-Build. If you come across any issues, be sure to file an issue on GitHub. Sometimes when building an Angular app, I'll reference a component in the template that I haven't imported. Now, of course, I'll get an error and then I'll have to go through the effort of importing the component. Now, I wish there was a better way. Oh, wait, there is. The Angular language service has been updated to now automatically import components via a quick fix in your editor. Want to know what else makes this so great? It works with standalone components and module-based components. I know I've shown some cool things, and so have other folks on the team, but there are a few more things that I want to sneak into this update. The CLI now supports generating a standalone component with the standalone flag. Also, we're simplifying the output of ng-new. Let me explain. We want to streamline the output of ng-new, and so we're removing test.ts, polyfills.ts, and environments file. If you need to use the environments file in your project, no problem. Create it and then just add your configuration. Polyfills can now be specified directly in the polyfill section of angular.json. Okay, all right. That was a lot of updates. Now for the update that many of you have been waiting for. What are we working on next? Well, we're focused on three things. First, we're tackling improvements to our server-side rendering pipeline. Also, we're devoting time to exploring reactivity in Angular. And finally, we're working on bringing more quality of life improvements across the board. If you want to keep track of our progress on these efforts, be sure to stay tuned to the Angular roadmap. All right, friends, that's it for me. Enjoy these updates and go build great apps.
Mark, thank you so much for sharing those updates with the Angular community. Angular v15 is packed with new features and improvements. There has never been a better time to be an Angular developer. So far, you've heard from us, and well, it's time for us to hear from you. That's right, we're just moments away from the live Q&A section. Be sure to put your questions in the chat so we can answer them. Ready? Let's get started.
All right, friends at home, thanks so much for coming to the Angular v15 launch event. We are super thrilled that you're all here. My name is Mark from the Angular team, and I am just so excited for you. So here's what we need you to do first and foremost. If you do have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat so that way we can answer them, and we're really eager to do so. I'm going to introduce the team. We have Doug Parker, Jessica Janik, Jeremy Elborn, Alex Rickabaugh, and Motorsky and Minko Getchev. And again, I'm Mark Thompson. So let's get underway with some questions from the chat. All right, great question. Let's start off with this one from Lucas. Lucas, thanks for joining us. It says, I'm wondering what was the reason behind removing the environment folder from the ng-new project template? Who wants to answer that question?
Yeah, I can jump in. So the reasoning is it's not just the environments. We actually removed a number of different files, as you saw in Mark's section of the video, about dropping out the test.ts file, the karma configuration, a lot of other stuff that we're trying to simplify. And the reason for this is mainly about trying to simplify and lower the barrier to entry for new developers getting started with Angular. If you create a new project and you look at this new thing and you have 10 config files and you don't really know what they all do, you don't really know what this karma thing is, you don't know when you would ever edit test.ts. And for the most part, you really don't. You know, almost 99% of developers will never touch those files. And so instead, what we're doing is kind of just hiding them away for a little bit, letting them not burden new developers who don't necessarily need to learn about them. And instead, in the future, when you do need to modify those files and you're like, oh, I want to add test coverage or something like that, that's when we still have a capability. You can create these files, add whatever configuration you want. Same thing for environments. And so really the takeaway here is not that we're removing environments or that we're discouraging it. The support is still there. You can still do everything that you did in v14. If you just ng update with environments, it'll still all work. The main thing is just about getting it out of the critical path. So people don't need to worry about it too much when they're just getting started. And instead they learn about it if and when they do need environments sometime in the future.
All right, thanks, Doug. We have another question. Says, when can we expect Angular Fire package to be updated to support v15? Well, it's currently incompatible with the TS version. Okay, so I actually have the answer for this one. So what happens here is I actually just spoke to this team and they're working on making this transition over. So you can expect that very soon. They are working on it. I literally just spoke to them about this. So this is coming in a very short time. I can't give you an exact date because then I don't want you to come and find me on Twitter when it doesn't happen by that date, but that's happening very soon. Let's see, next question. No question, just thank you for everything you do. You know what? Here, I have something for you. You see this? High five from us to you. We are very happy that you are enjoying Angular. Okay, so how important is it to upgrade to the stable build for standalone components as a part of Angular 15? Can I work with Angular 14 for a while? The great Nate that everyone is raving about in the chat is asking a question. So let's make sure we get to this one. Who wants to answer this question?
I can take that. Yeah. So hello, Nate. I think as of the v15 release, when standalone components are stable, we will very likely, well, actually, it's impossible for us to now break any part of standalone components in 14. So effectively, the v14 version of standalone is also stabilized. Feel free to depend on it.
Okay, excellent. I want to follow up with this one. So Doug just gave an answer about removing the TS files by default. So this question says, how will we configure environment-specific files in the future? And this is at build time. So you can still do that. If you need the environments.ts, you can just add it back in. It's not like removed from the framework, right? So it's still a part of the framework. We're just saying if you start out, most users and most developers just don't update those files. And it's just more things for people to worry about when they first learn Angular. So you can do that right now.
Yeah, and to kind of expand on that, we didn't really change anything with the environments API. The structure and how it worked is still going to work exactly the same way. So if you want to add in v15 right now, it's a little bit manual, and you have to add it, set up a key in angular.json and create the file. It's not too much work. We have some documentation on it to explain how to do that. Going forward, one thing we want to do is add some more functionality in the CLI and some more schematics to actually generate these things for you, so that when you do want to get started with environments, you could just do something like ng generate environments, and it would just do that for you, make it a little bit smoother. So that's still in the pipeline, something we're hoping to do shortly in the future. But for now, it still works the same way, and we have some documentation on AIO to explain how to do that.
Thanks, Doug. Here's another question from Rizos. It says, server-side rendering with Google Cloud Functions in Firebase is for the time being a quite tricky process. What's in store for the SSR with Firebase? But can we just talk, let's actually expand this to like talk about anything we can say about SSR in general.
I can talk about the deployment a little bit. Some an initiative called FireStack that they announced weeks ago, right? And as part of they are working on framework where we choose the ng deploy functionality we developed some time out. This should allow you smoother deployment to Firebase practice or Cloud Run with better developer.
Minko, yeah, your audio is coming out like you're under 4 layers of aquariums.
All right, sorry about that.
All right, you all are asking some really great questions, and there's a question in Russian that I don't know if anybody speaks Russian that can answer that for us. So we're gonna have to go to some of those that are in English. Oh, this is an interesting question. This is more philosophical, and I would love for us to just jump in on this. Maybe I would love to hear from Jessica or Emma on this one, just what we're thinking. So do you have any plans on making Angular more popular among non-Angular front-end devs? My company switched to an alternative mostly because of the difficulty hiring Angular developers.
I guess I can talk about this a little bit. We are working a lot on our APIs and our reactivity. We're doing a lot of exploration into new potential ways that we can improve the experience for people. And on top of that, we're starting to be more present at overall within the JavaScript community, like at different conferences and stuff. So I think part of the reason it is less popular is just because we haven't been as visible in the overall whole JavaScript scene. So there's a lot of effort being done, a lot of research and thought being put into how we can continue to make the experience better for new Angular developers and for people who maybe have used Angular in the past and are coming back to it. So I think all of those efforts will work towards making it more popular among non-Angular front-end developers.
We also get a lot from the community here about, how you all share and talk about Angular, and, feel free to share it out to 10 of your friends or something like that. I don't know. But, we love to hear conversations within the community, especially with where the Angular community can talk with other web developers. And we love to see Angular showing up at conferences that maybe we don't even hear about, or a small local conference that's going on in all throughout the world. And the Angular community is all worldwide and is able to represent a lot of these things. And so we want to do our part in representing Angular, but it also, there's a lot of benefit in the community itself showing up. And we really appreciate all the community members that are able to help with this and help push this framework that we all love so much.
All right, I'm going to direct this next question at Jeremy. Could we please kindly introduce a date picker range with multiple calendar view? But before you answer that with a yes or no, Jeremy, that whether we can do this, can you just talk about how could the community let us know the best components for us to develop with Angular material and the CDK?
The best channel for feedback is always going to be GitHub issues for feature requests. Right now, the day picker in Angular material just focuses on the experience with a single calendar month showing at a given time. I'm assuming this is talking about the experience where you would have 2 months side by side and having the range that spreads between them. We don't have any plans to implement something like that, but you could potentially use the Met calendar component to build something custom for it. More long-term in the roadmap, we do plan on adding more CDK primitives for things like this. So in particular, the day picker implements the ARIA grid pattern, and you could potentially build a calendar out of that without a ton of extra work. There's still a fair amount of date work that goes into it, though. So we hope to continue adding more of the primitives that drive the components to the CDK so that over time, you don't have to ask for an Angular material component that gives you some sort of custom calendar presentation, is that it's easy to just pull the parts you need off the shelf and put them together.
All right, awesome. Here's another question. Will there be a global option to turn on standalone true by default?
I can take that one. So one of the complicating factors here is Angular supports today just-in-time compilation still, or JIT compilation. And what that means is you build your Angular application without our compiler, you ship that code to the browser, and then we run our compilation kind of when the application loads. And it's kind of impossible to do global defaults in JIT for these kinds of flags. So as long as we support JIT compilation, this is not something we'll be able to do. However, it is possible that at some point in the future, we decide to make standalone components the default. That depends on you all. That depends on if you like this feature, if we see it kind of getting lots of use, if we see people are having a good time with it and there aren't any major roadblocks, we may decide that, yeah, standalone components make the most sense for Angular. And you would have to say standalone false if you want to use ng module-based components. So likely we'll remove some of the friction there as this feature gets adoption.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. So Mark asks, hey, Mark, I like that energy. Do we have any links for the stuff outlined in the intro into the recorded videos, like the ESBuild platform stuff? I didn't catch it. So here's one thing you can do. This stream will be rewatchable at any point on our channel. And we're going to be releasing all the content in smaller chunks so that way you can watch the parts that were the most interest to you. So you'll have that option. And do we have any any details like the release notes? Oh, you could check out the official Angular blog that also has details for what we've released and all those and things like that. So you can find those details in the Angular blog, still on this YouTube channel, and in the individual videos that we are releasing shortly after this one. So thank you for asking that. I'm so glad. All right, are we planning to replace Webpack in the near future?
Yeah, so I can jump in here. So Mark talked about earlier in his video about our experimental ES build support, and about using that as a little bit more modern way to build your applications, getting faster builds. We've seen some really good performance improvements so far, and we're excited to keep pushing on that. I think longer term, we're hoping that this will eventually replace Webpack. This will probably take a little bit of time. Our goal right now for the next year is to try to ship the ES Build system by default, so that when you create a new application, you'd be able to just ng build and get that. There'll probably still be an opt-out for people who do want to still use Webpack or have custom configuration. That'll all still be available to you. But we see a lot of major benefits in build time and performance that are available in ES Build that are not available in Webpack. So we are very interested in trying to pursue that and seeing what we can do. A lot of this will be dependent on the community and how much flexibility people are looking for, what they're trying to get out of it. And so we'll definitely be listening and seeing how people respond to the experimental builder. It is available now to try if you want to play with it. So do check it out. We're open to feedback and issues about perhaps some compatibility differences, where maybe you find your app breaks because there's one specific option or edge case that you're using that isn't quite supported yet. We'd love to hear that feedback, and we'd love to patch that up. So it is just a quick drop-in replacement, and you just get better build times. That's really what we're looking for.
Okay, before I read this question, I have to issue a correction. There was a comment that I said was in Russian. It was actually in Bulgarian. That is my bad. I apologize for that. So here's another question. Any plans on making the styling of your own components with Angular material more simple? I find that part to be the most not straightforward. Emma, any ideas around this? Or any way you can help?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that styling components is my favorite part of it, but it's also pretty complicated, and I end up looking in the source code a lot. We have some good guides on how to get started on material.angular.io for how to style your own components. So definitely get started there. And really, v15, my video talks about, we updated to MDC-based Angular material components. And while there's a lot of great included benefits in that update, it also unlocks the ability for us to move on to more modern material theming in the future, which includes revisiting the way that you style components. So this unlocks future work that we're excited for doing some updated theming and styling there. But for now, definitely head to the documentation. Jeremy actually revisited and rewrote a lot of that documentation in the last couple of versions. So definitely get started there. I'll put the link in the chat.
Yeah, and also I want to kind of add in here that, like Emma said, moving these components that are based on top of MDC Web to stable is the first step towards addressing this. So we've been spending a long time working on this project in order to consolidate our components with the code that's been produced by the material design organization inside of Google. And there are a lot of changes under the hood that are not immediately obvious. That includes starting to use CSS variables and starting to use the concept of design tokens inside of the components. And our next big step is to open up the theming APIs to include the ability to customize those design tokens, in particularly with the Material 3 theming system. That is one of our biggest priorities for the Angular components team. We know that that will unlock a lot of customization potential.
All right, I'm not sure the best person for this one. I don't know if it's Minko or Emma, but let's talk about this because Emma is one of the people who's also fantastic on this, and Jeremy. We got a lot of people who can answer this, so nobody fight over answering, all right? But I want to say this. When can we get more documentation on implementing accessibility for Angular applications? Emma, you already have a workshop that is online doing accessibility in Angular. What else can people do for documentation? And I want to hear from everybody who has something to say about this.
Yeah, so absolutely get started with the workshop. I'll put that link in the chat too. So there's two things. The material.angular.io website has per component the accessibility guides and a lot more accessibility guides. Web accessibility is less of a thing that the framework can as a whole provide as much as we have a lot of resources. So the CDK has an accessibility package. Depending on your accessibility needs, we have a lot of guidance per component for material components. For the framework as a whole, there's not a ton of individual like Angular specific web accessibility stuff we have. Our best guidance is to, and the guide we have is really to point you to web accessibility as a whole. So we do our best to make Angular as a framework as accessible as possible, but a lot of that comes down to you as the developer and the use cases you're building. Jeremy, do you want to?
Yeah, I think I would corroborate a lot of that, which is we often get a lot of questions over the years, all the way back to AngularJS, of like, what's the Angular way to do X, right? It's like, what's the Angular way of building an accessible application? What's the Angular way of calling a function? What's the Angular way of adding two numbers? And sometimes there is no Angular way to do it, right? That it is just like it is kind of separate from the problem space that Angular addresses for you. And for the most part, accessibility does fall into this category, right? It's a large problem space that is largely separate from the problem space that Angular solves for you, which is more about managing your project structure and rendering and having a system for dependency injection, things like that. That said, Angular material components, we try very hard to make sure that they are accessible as possible. And we try to provide some useful utilities in the CDK in order to help out there. But the bulk of the iceberg is under the water there. So there's a ton of great content out on the web on building accessible applications. There are books and articles and newsletters I can recommend probably, but I don't want to like get too deep into that right now.
All right, awesome. What is our opinion on Analog.js, the Angular meta framework? Any chance we will gain support from the core team? Now, before we jump in on this, I think the bigger question, because there are lots of questions about meta frameworks in general. So what can we say about meta frameworks and the plans or just direction of meta frameworks in terms of Angular? What are we thinking about that space?
I probably Minko should answer this one. So the term meta framework is not super well defined inside of the web ecosystem. Different people have different definitions for it. I will share my definition for it, where a meta framework combines both a client-side UI framework that runs in the browser and a server-side web application framework, such as Express, and some tight integration between them, where this integration kind of spreads between build system and features. So server-side rendering is the most common thing you see in what people consider meta frameworks, because you have both the server portion of it that is responsible for the server rendering and the client side that is then bootstrapping on top of that and doing either some sort of hydration or similar attachment to the DOM that's created from the server render. In Angular, we've always kind of been a little bit more than just a client-side framework, right? When Angular came out, it had Angular CLI with it that also gives you a build system, and we have Angular Universal that gives you server-side rendering. The thing that's been kind of missing is just one automatically configured out-of-the-box solution for that, right? That's like you push a button and you get a Angular Universal app, and I think also the level of integration that you get between that server render and the client side coming in on top of it. In terms of the question being like about analog specifically, this is a community project that the Angular team's not really involved with at all. We love to see work like this happening though. Like I think it's Brandon Roberts is the lead developer for that, and he's fantastic. And we don't plan on like making this like a canonical Angular project or anything like that. But we always want to put our support behind community members who are building really cool things with Angular. Minko, anything you want to add on this?
Is it back to normal?
It's very bad. Forget I asked.
I want to add one thing, Jeremy, which is that one of our goals that we've talked about over the next year or two is to make Angular less weird when it comes to integrating it into other things. We've always kind of pushed the boundary a little bit with what we did in terms of build tooling and technologies that we depend on. We were one of the first frameworks to kind of natively build around ES modules. We were one of the first frameworks to stop shipping common JS code and go all in on ES modules. But that has traditionally made us kind of hard to fit into other things in the ecosystem. And so that's something we're taking a look at and trying to make it easier to build, new community-driven meta frameworks or other, interesting integrations on top of Angular.
I'll just add on top of that Jeremy kind of pointed out how different people have different interpretations of meta framework. And I think one thing that's interesting is that Angular itself already actually does a lot of things that people would consider a meta framework in other frameworks or systems. We have great testing support, great integration with unit testing, great an update story. We have universal for server-side rendering. There's a lot more stuff that's officially supported that many people would call part of a meta framework. And I do agree with Jeremy's definition about having more of that integration on the server. So I don't know that I would specifically call Angular a meta framework, but my point is that a lot of the features that you might be looking for in a meta framework are things that are already natively supported in Angular. So I think that's an interesting comparison point and just a different way of thinking about that particular problem for meta frameworks.
Okay, here's a great question from Esther White. Says, what are the best choices when it comes to responsiveness now that we have to move away from Angular Flex layout?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about this. Emma, I'm sure, can also talk about
I want to hear from Emma on this one because I know Emma was involved with this project. So
yeah, Jeremy and I can both talk about it.
Sure.
So the reason for Angular Flex layout being deprecated is it was always an experimental project, and we know a lot of the community really loves it. And we had the opportunity, now that we no longer have to support IE 11, to do a lot of upgrades, right? Jeremy mentioned we're moving over to CSS variables in Angular material. Like, that wasn't possible prior to IE 11 support being removed. So being part of the modern web in a lot of ways means getting to use all of these new APIs and look at the new things out there. And CSS has come a really long way since Angular first launched, and since we're on version 15 now, and CSS has skyrocketed recently in popularity and use. So there are really great native ways to do a lot of things that Flux Layout does. I know responsiveness, there's a lot of like breakpoints, but CSS has breakpoints, right? So you're able to use a lot of the same like CSS breakpoints for responsiveness using Flexbox or grid layout, any of those things natively. We have some blog posts on this, and if you have specific migrations that you're really concerned about in your like enterprise use cases, please, from that blog post, head to the link to the Flex Layout repository, and the maintainers of Flex Layout are excited to make sure that there's migration guides for specific things. I think responsiveness is the most common one that you'll see people requesting, but please head there and voice the types of migration guides you're concerned about. Jeremy?
Yeah, so when I talk about Flex Layout, I try to think about like, what is it that Flex Layout actually did? And it enabled you to style your application in your template, right? It provided a bunch of Angular directives for setting different Flex properties based on media queries in your template. And a lot of people really like that style of styling. And the current, what's the word I'm looking for? The like top tier solution for that is actually Tailwind. So this is kind of a I've seen some debate on people saying like, oh, like Tailwind's not real CSS, and I don't really agree with that. I think that Tailwind is a philosophy for CSS authoring about using very small atomic CSS classes instead of creating bigger, more semantic CSS classes. And I think both are perfectly valid ways to go about authoring CSS. But Tailwind is really kind of leaning into that approach where your template is the source of truth, so to speak, for your style decisions. And if you want that experience, Tailwind is probably the way to go today.
Okay, friends, so here's what's happening right now. We only have a few minutes left in this event. So people who are answering questions, we're going to do a lightning round because there are really too many questions for us to get through before the end of the session. So we're going to try to do a lightning round around some answers. Any plans on publishing more tutorials about schematics?
Sure. So a really quick answer is probably not immediately, probably closer, maybe end of next year. A little bit beyond that, we're hoping to do a deeper dive into how we can evolve and improve schematics. I think one big part of that is going to be expanding the documentation, adding more tutorials, more explanations. And I think this is going to be a key part there.
All right. Will on-push change detection ever become the default option?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm pretty comfortable saying no, I think.
Yeah, definitely not. I think onPush is a little bit flawed in the way it works. When you make a component onPush, you promise not only that you're going to obey the onPush rules, but that all of your children will. And that's a promise that it's not really safe to make in a lot of cases. I've also I've profiled a lot of applications, and almost always when I see a performance problem, it's because change detection is running too much, not because change detection is too expensive. So I think onPush is kind of a little bit limited in its usefulness in that way.
Okay, seeing as standalone components are now solid or stable, what's your take on implementing CSS preprocessors like SCSS, SAS, or less into standalone components?
So the two aren't really related at all, right? The ability to alter styles for a component is the same with and without standalone components. I can answer a separate question of like what's my opinion on CSS preprocessors, which is I think something that I maybe have a different opinion on than most of the community is I see some sentiment sometimes that it's like, oh, should I write CSS or should I write SAS? And that's not really the right way to look at it because in all of these cases, right, with both SAS and less and stylus, you are writing CSS. That is the ultimate thing you are producing. But these tools, they are all CSS authoring tools. So SAS is a tool that helps you write CSS better or more efficiently. In particular, SAS mixins, SAS variables, SAS functions give you a ton of flexibility in how you can build APIs other developers can use when dealing with your styles. And we use it extensively for Angular Materials theming system, right? We can give you SAS mixins and you have the flexibility to apply those mixins in the way that makes the most sense for your application instead of just giving you raw CSS assets that you have to dump in somewhere. And so I think it's kind of a false question to think of these tools versus CSS, but like how do these tools help you write CSS better? And in that case, like obviously we love SAS. Disclaimer, the SAS team is also, a lot of SAS development comes from Google as well. Like Natalie Weizenbaum, who's the lead and the creator of SAS, is also at Google and is on a sister team with us. So we have a great relationship.
A ton of flexibility for that flex layout that you're working with, maybe?
Jessica, all right, what is the one thing you're all most excited for when it comes to improving the SSR pipeline? But before you folks chime in with your answers here, I want you to keep in mind that we just have so many SSR questions. So if we could state this in a general way that lets people know what we're thinking about for SSR, that'll help answer a lot of questions for people.
I can rapid fire here. We're looking at hydration. We're looking at DevX improvements, ESM support with our universal library, and integrating it more fully with our tooling.
I
There's
can
more.
add a little bit more to that as well, of saying that the next year is probably going to have a lot of development for Universal. On top of the stuff that Jessica mentioned, I think we're also looking at trying to revamp the way the DOM emulation works, as well as trying to improve the development builds to make it a little bit easier to actually run Universal in development, make that faster. Hopefully, longer term, we can eventually integrate it with DS Build and get some of the similar improvements that we're seeing in the CLI also in Universal. So lots of cool stuff coming down the pipeline for SSR and Universal. And I definitely saw a lot of comments in there asking about it. So really excited to be pushing more on that in the next year. You're muted, Mark.
And I was muted. I said, Nate said Angular for the win, and we say no, Nate for the win. Thank you so much.
We lost your audio again.
All right, so for this question, do we have any plans to make Angular support creating pluggable apps like WordPress plugins?
I think that may be too open-ended of a question. I think we would need to have maybe a little bit more specifics on there, which I don't know that we have time to get into that level of specifics in the time we have left.
Just want to share some general love for the platform right now. It looks like Elijah's having a great time and very excited about these upcoming changes. Thank you. We're very excited to have such a fantastic community. Okay, check this one out, friends. Is it possible to publish some of the good practices or recommendations that should be applied on an Angular project regarding code linting and prettier configuration, for example?
Can I talk about this one, or my audio is still...
You're back, Minko. Get you. Wonderful.
Oh, right.
No robot. Perfect.
Just for the end. Yeah, I'll say that there are a lot of strong opinions about syntax usually, and we shouldn't be defining what the syntactical conventions for different teams are. So chances are that we're not going to generalize this for every user of the Angular CLI, but the Angular and the TypeScript style guides for Google, they're all open source, so you can review them and you can readjust to them if that's the conventions that you would like to follow.
I'll also add really quick, it's not quite linting, it's a little bit different, but we do have extended diagnostics in the Angular compiler now, which allows some more flexible checks, a little bit more opinionated stuff about places where you might be making mistakes in your Angular templates, or places where you can have performance improvements or accessibility improvements. These are things that we've been building on and we'll keep expanding on. They're things that are enabled by your project by default as you ng update. So I think final message here is ng update and see all these awesome new improvements.
Okay, I think that we have, we got one more question that I think will be great because a lot of people probably are thinking about this, because we've already we've already stated about standalone components, standalone APIs being stable. So people have lots of questions about best practices around standalone components. Should I use Bootstrap module? Should I still use Bootstrap component? So should I always change the .bootstrap module to Bootstrap component in main.ts when I need to keep app module and still create some components in my project?
Yeah, I can take this. Let me see how fast I can answer this. You should do what you want. If you want to use an app module, an ng module to bootstrap your application, that's completely fine to do. You can still use any number of components as standalone, including your app component. If you kind of want to remove boilerplate from your application, kind of streamline everything, you can use the Bootstrap component API. It's there. They work kind of, they do very similar things. There's nothing you really can't do with the Bootstrap component compared to ng modules. In the future, we will be looking at updating the Angular style guide to describe what a standalone application looks like, and maybe have a ng new standalone project in the CLI. There's a couple reasons why we haven't done that quite yet. Some of them just related to we want to actually define what this experience is. There's also a couple technical hurdles around schematics and libraries that have like ng add support that look for app modules today. So we need to make sure to get all of those problems resolved before we're able to roll this out.
All right, friends. Well, with that, I think this comment. So thanks to everyone on the chat, and thanks to everyone in the room for answering questions. This comment represents, I think, how we feel about the community. Lots and lots of love for the community. This is a perfect way to end with Ivan. And thank you so much, friends, for tuning in and for just supporting Angular. And yeah, that's it for the Angular team. And we're gonna go ahead and say continue to be so kind to each other. Continue to build up the community. And as always, go build great apps.
All right, Angular community, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out and celebrate the launch of Angular v15. You are the most important part of the Angular community. Angular wouldn't be what it is without you. So thank you for building apps, for filing bugs, for submitting PRs, giving talks, writing blogs, and everything that you do to keep Angular thriving. Be sure to run ng update to get all the new wonderful features we shared today. Until next time, bye!